here's some clothes and a gun.
And
You're good to go.
Like, at that point, just draft Alabama, right? Like, they're way more prepared for this.
Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast, where we fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host, Javier Ortiz.
What is up, my nerds?
And Ian Anderson.
Some shit.
We appreciate your help growing the podcast. Go ahead and hit that follow or subscribe button. Tell a friend about us. Check out our website, whatsourverdict.com, where you can listen to all of our episodes, sign up for our newsletter, pick up some sweet merch, interact with us, and listen to our What's Our Verdict TV episodes as well. The question we always ask is if you ever find yourself wondering if you should spend the time, money, or both on a movie. To help with that question, each week we put a movie on trial, discuss the facts, pass judgment, and let you know our verdict. Today we're reviewing The Tomorrow War. It was released July 2nd, 2021. It was written by Zach Dean. It was directed by Chris McKay. It stars Chris Pratt, Yvonne Strahovski, Betty Gilpin, Ryan Kiera Armstrong, Edwin Hodge, Sam Richardson, and J.K. Simmons. A family man is drafted to fight in a future war where the fate of humanity relies on his ability to confront the past. If you haven't seen this film and you want to avoid spoilers, first of all, go to YouTube, What's Our Verdict, check out our spoiler-free review, which is up and available now, to see if you even want to watch this film. If you do and you want to avoid spoilers, go watch it now, pause, come back, and pick up with us where you left off, because we're going to spoil the shit out of this thing. So as we were talking about that, I was saying that I didn't find this very unique because all I saw was like similarities from other movies that I love. So I want to talk about a few of them. I wrote them down as I was watching this. Every time I pop up and I'm like, God, that feels like I'm watching another movie. So the first one I thought of was Edge of Tomorrow, and two reasons, because there's like some time travel elements, even though it's very different, but the aliens very much reminded me of Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, the little tentacle things.
With the tentacles and the way that they move really fast and they kind of roll around and use their tentacles to fly. That's what I was like, that kind of feels similar. The other one I thought about is Independence Day. Right out the gate, I thought this has a very similar vibe to Gotta Save the World, based on alien invasion.
And they had like the burning cityscapes.
Yeah, exactly. and then obviously Alien, and this one comes in more at the end when they walk into, big spoiler here, into the spaceship at the end. Like, it felt very visually Alien, the Aliens franchise to me, where they would walk into their ship or whatnot with the alien in it. And then I thought of Terminator. The way that they kind of pop into the time travel thing had a very Terminator vibe to it, like the whole electric ball where they drop in all kind of naked and shit in those movies. And then lastly, I thought of Starship Troopers. Like, I couldn't help but think of like the bugs and the
I think I've seen that.
Never-ending ammo. So it was kind of interesting to watch. Those are some I thought of.
So I can skip that then. I can skip the 400 round mags that their M4s have.
Yeah. I seriously was laughing the whole movie every time Chris Pratt would just hold the trigger down and never stop firing. I was like, oh, Javier's going to have some words about this one.
What's so frustrating is like, you could do that. There's drum mags, right?
Sure.
That like hold a shit ton of ammo. Like, you could get away. Like, all you have to do is make minor tweaks with these guns, and you could convince me that you have 400 rounds of ammo.
Yeah. But they don't.
And
it's even worse because, like, with this one, when they're preparing to go and he's showing that scientist guy, Charlie, he's showing him how to, put the magazine in.
Yeah.
I was like, you blatantly show me that he's got like a 25 round magazine.
Right. Exactly. Hold it in front of the camera. I'm like, okay, he's got 30 rounds.
Exactly.
And I can't remember a time when I see someone change bags. Like, I don't see anyone reload.
Certainly didn't in that hallway fight. Like,
no,
he just was holding down and it was just going. And then he just randomly drops the gun to his shoulder strap and pulls out his sidearm. And I'm like,
which was kind of cool.
It was really cool. But at the same time, like, why? That should have been done like 19 times already.
You know what my thought was? Let's see how many rounds this handgun has.
And they only ever fired off like 5 out of the
had like 6 shots in a Glock, and I'm like, there's a huge discrepancy in gun ammo here.
Yeah. But yeah, those are the elements of other movies that I started to see playing into the writing of this movie. Now, I don't want anyone to I don't think that diminishes the fun that this movie can be at times, because it doesn't. It just, like you were saying in the spoiler free, Javier, there's a blatant familiarity to a lot of parts of this movie, and those are the movies that I kept coming up with.
The impression that I kept getting was this would have made a really good video game. Like, this feels like a video story.
it's
That's
ridiculous
right now.
enough that in a video game setting, you'd be like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But
Well,
not so
especially
much in
like
a movie.
especially like a survival style, like, you know, you drop you in a level and then it's just like these waves of enemies coming through.
Yeah.
You just get, because like, and then they get bigger and crazier and harder. So yeah, I mean, I could see that. The other
Should have been Gears of War.
exactly.
Yeah. One thing about this movie that I liked was they don't immediately show you the monsters.
True.
And I kind of dig that. Like A Quiet Place does that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For the first half of the first movie. And that gets me. Like every
Yeah.
time when there's a thing that I should be terrified of and I don't know what it looks like, for some reason, like that makes it way worse. So I thought they did a really good job, and they didn't drag it on for that much, for that long. It was, I don't know, 20 minutes, right? From when you could actually see one of those things to when they show you. So
Yeah.
it wasn't super long, but I thought that added a nice little suspense level to it
Yeah.
in the beginning, at least.
Well, and I like two things about it. I like the look of these creatures too. Like they're pretty, when you do finally see them, they're pretty intimidating.
Yeah, they're
enough.
freaky looking, dude.
Yeah, and like their mouths are pretty. I didn't love the way they first introduced them, like with that really far away shot through the scope that was backwards and blurry. You
Yeah.
see like the whole, like the wave of like 5 soldiers get knocked down with like their spikes or whatever, and then
Mhm.
you see them start eating them from a distance, and you're kind of really struggling to see what it was. I was like, I don't love that, but I get why they did it. But when you first see them up close, I was like, oh shit, these things are they're pretty intimidating. Now, the problem I did have is they show these things swarming and they're pretty much invincible other than their throat and their belly. And yet a lot of these guys get a lot of time to have some downtime and just kind of take a breath and not do much. I'm like, these seem to me like the type of creature that aren't going to give you that kind of downtime.
Yeah, like when they were driving the Jeep on the beach and then they call him, she shoots off a flare and then a helicopter shows up. I'm like, this is a lot of noise, a lot of drawing attention to yourself. These things run as fast as Jeeps. So, I mean, they could just be like right in those woods. I agreed with that. I was like, man, there's a lot of downtime for a war that we're losing against aliens.
Well, let me jump into the end here too, not to spoil too much right out the gate, but the time where he's talking to Yvonne Strahovski's character, when they're sitting there on that oil rig, the changed up oil rig, there's a fire burning behind them that's got to be hotter than balls. And they're like maybe 100 feet from this thing, and they're just, ignoring it, having a conversation together. And there's aliens all over the place on this thing, but none are there until the very end.
How do those things swim? Because, you got large mass of, I don't know. I was kind of confused about a lot of things. Like, was there only one female? And if so, how did she have that many kids?
That was my question too, because I thought that they referenced females and that they took one so they could figure out how to destroy all the females. And maybe that's the case in the future, that there are multiple females, but back in the past, there was only one.
It started with one,
Yeah.
which is the one that they had.
Gotcha.
I think that's the assumption that I made, but I was so confused, and I was more confused by, so this movie felt like most movies have 3 acts in it. You have the first act that introduces you to the characters and story. And then you have the second act, which is like the meat of the exposition and the action. And then you have the final act, which is how you close this thing out. That's the structure of majority of movies.
Should I know exactly where those are in the movie?
Typically run together to the point that you're like, oh, now I'm into the second act, or you're like, whoa, this movie's ending. Like, that's how I know I love the movies, when I get to the end and I'm like, oh, fuck, it's over. I didn't even realize I was into the third act. You know what I mean?
Right.
So this one, like you said, Javier, it's like, oh, welcome to the second act, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, welcome to the third act, ladies and gentlemen. So it was very choppy the way that it was put together.
Yeah. So end of Act 1, I was like, oh, is this movie coming to an end? Did I like this movie so much and I didn't realize I spent 2 hours watching this? And I literally hit pause to see like where it is. I'm a third of the way through. I'm like, what else are we gonna do? Like, what else is there?
It was interesting writing, to say the least, because there are parts that I loved, but man, there was some weird shit going on.
Can we talk about the first of the movie, their strategy for how they're going to win this thing? Because I feel like taking like hundreds of thousands of people and just giving them a gun and zipping them over there. Like you'd have better luck if you put people into a cannon and just shot them at the Whitespikes.
That's 100% true. You'd have a better job building a wall of dead people around your base.
Seriously, though.
And I think where they failed at that part is they briefly mention, you go through this really quick expository section where it talks about they showed up, we sent people back in time or forward in time to fight this war. It didn't go well, so now we implement a draft. What they should have shown was, like, in my opinion, they show, okay, here, these people show up, and the transition from Act 1 to Act 2, instead of this big expository section, is show them sending the world's current military to the future, and then show me a scene where they go to fight, and then we just see, you don't even have to show me the aliens at that point. Just show me, like, burning beaches and land of just dead soldiers, actual soldiers. Then that shows me while now we're sending civilians.
Yeah, or show me that scene where only 20% of the troops come back and they're all mangled.
Yeah, that would work too.
I'd be like, oh damn, like these are trained troops and they are in bad shape, right?
Yeah.
Like I totally agree. There are a handful of ways you could do that. And they don't have to stray that far from what they were already doing.
In fact, it would have made it probably a 10-minute less movie, because that was a 5-minute exposition on what the hell happened that I was just show me. I don't need to hear about it.
Can we talk about the logistics of this? So they say that they jump the military over. The military gets just bitch slapped by these things. And then they mention only 50% of military personnel can jump. Right. So then we have to start bringing in civilians. And then when they are in their 7-day basic training, okay.
There was no training. They were like, just here's some clothes and a gun. And you're good to go.
Like at that point, just draft Alabama, right? Like they're way more prepared for this. But then they were like piecing together, they only send people who have died at that point in the future. So like, I'm a little confused. Is that the criteria? And if so, are you telling me that only 50% or I don't know how to word this, but 50% of our military is like dead in 30 years from now? And I'm losing myself on this question. My question is confused.
No, I get what you're saying. And yes, and you're yes and no. So when they first, that's the problem with the way that they went through this exposition. And it was so complex. This is why I feel like it needed to be a television series, because what they were saying is when they first sent the military, only half of them qualified, because at that point in time, when they first showed up and we sent our military, only half were dead, which we don't find out was part of. They just say only half were qualified. Well, what does that mean? We don't find that out until Chris Pratt gets drafted. Then they explain the criteria.
That's a huge number. You're telling me 30 years from now, 50% of the military is dead?
Sure. But I mean, you got to take into account, you have people that are probably close to retiring that were career military. You got some old age.
Yeah, I don't know the demographics of the military. That just seemed high to me.
Sure. Right? No, I mean, but yeah, that's where they come from. So only half of them were available. But yeah, that's what they're saying is half were going to be dead prior to 30 years from now. So they qualify, or that time. Mm-hmm. And then the 7 days that they messed up because Chris Pratt's group gets pulled early. They only got 1 day,
right?
Which they didn't do a very good job of explaining. They just, everything kind of freaked out and there's an alarm going off and we're sending your ass and dropping you to your death because we can't even control our time machine at this point. So we're going to drop you onto a fucking building pool. That was the weirdest fucking shit.
That's the PUBG comment that Ian had.
Not gonna lie. Okay, now if I'm in charge of the future military and it's looking like things are like the fecal matter is hitting the rotating oscillator here, then why isn't it, let's send as much information about these things back and be working on the science 30 years from now or 30 years before? Or why don't you take all these new people that can jump back, boost your population, and then be ready to fight them when they come? So I just thought the way they went about like you pretty much were just feeding them because only 30% of people were coming back. So you're making the problem worse by sending more people there. So it was just weird. It was interesting idea.
Yeah, like we don't even talk about the idea of sending information back until the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Like,
and he's got the what is it? The toxin or yeah.
Well, he's helping her with it, and she explains when they showed up and gives dates and shit like that. And I'm sitting here going, and I had that question before. I'm like, you're misusing your resources because you showed up, you knew when they showed up. Why don't you tell people so that we can start preparing for the actual future instead of the future we're sending people to? Because again, you can research, because that's all it took. In fact, it took a fucking junior high kid to say, oh, that's over here at this volcano.
Which, that's what I texted you guys. I'm like, do they not know any real volcano experts? We got to go to a dude in his junior year of high school.
They had to keep that shit low key, man. We couldn't let the government know what they were doing because they would have shut that shit down. Remember?
I mean, it just seemed like the government didn't care. Like, I honestly think they could have done whatever they wanted, and the government would have just been like, okay, well, fuck you guys. So, honestly, you know around what time they show up. So you let the world know, you point every nuke at Russia and just be like, sorry guys, but the moment we see these things, we are blanketing Russia in radiation and just hoping for the best.
Serious. Yeah.
Yeah, there were so many things that didn't make sense.
That part reminded me of what is that Batman movie with Bane, where he's like running with the football as he's blowing up the stadium. When the dude with the soccer ball is running and they like freaking apparate. I was like, oh, this reminds me of Batman. I also thought it was weird, like the technology or lack thereof, right? So we can time travel, but we have to spend all night putting like DNA in like a little oscillator thing to figure out like a toxin that bonds with it. I'm like, okay, like, I mean, I'm just confused because I feel like we have that now. Like that if that technology didn't get better in 30 by the time we learned how to time travel.
Oh man. Yeah. That it just the science of it all makes no sense. Because they also talk about the time travel piece where I like but I like the conversation of we send you forward 7 days. For 7 days, and so the timelines are constantly moving forward. There's never so I liked that explanation, but
we don't get to pick where in time when in time we send you.
Yes, exactly. We send you forward to this date and you have 7 days, so everything's moving forward. But then my question becomes, okay, so let's just jump into this whole thing about his daughter, which was the most, like, I saw that coming before we ever even talked about time travel.
I'm embarrassed to admit I did it. I don't know why. As soon as that happened, I'm like, I should have seen this coming. It's 30 years. Of course she's still around, right? Like I don't know why I was so shocked. It was embarrassing. I was disappointed in myself.
Yeah. Well, and I had never seen I watched one trailer for this movie. It was like the initial trailer, which didn't show much or talk much about the movie. But I knew that Yvonne Strahovski was in it because I really enjoy her. And so I was sitting there going, okay, she's going to, as soon as I watched the movie and he had a daughter, I was like, oh, she's going to play his daughter in the future. So it was like one of those things that called in. My big problem is so we have this moment on the beach where we get that downtime for there's no aliens. And she's telling him, you left, you didn't come back. You came back and then you left. And I'm like, wait a minute. So the timelines keep moving forward, but now we're talking about shit that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to go back and change it. Oh, fuck. Now we're fucking with weird time travel shit again, which I'm okay. I love time travel movies to a certain degree. But I was like, so if you can change things, why are we still focusing on this future war instead of going back and changing shit?
Thank you.
In the past, why did it take this one guy when the world's almost over, years into us sending people into the future to go, hey, I have an idea?
So there's kind of like two modes of thinking in sci-fi time travel, right? Like one is you go back in time and you do something and it affects future events, usually for the worst for some reason, right? Yeah. Like for some reason you like squish a bug and it's like dystopian future. But it's never you come back, you squish a bug, and it's like utopian, like, wow, you solved world hunger somehow. Anyway, that doesn't make for a good story.
No.
Or it's a different time stream, right? Like you do something and that future still exists, but what you changed now, there's like an alternate reality, right?
Yeah.
They don't explain which one this is.
No,
right.
Yeah.
So like the whole time you're thinking, okay, past events affect future events. And so he's like, I'm going to go back. We're going to mass produce this toxin, but then I'm coming back here and I'm going to save you and this world. I'm like, no, you're doing that. Try to keep up, dude.
Yeah.
You're doing that by going back in time.
Yeah.
And mass producing this time. This won't exist. Like, don't come back here because this world's not going to, like, I don't think that's going to work. So I was like so confused by that sentiment, unless we're supposed to assume that he's like creating a different parallel reality. And so he's like, I'll do that. I'll create like a better future for the world. But in this timeline, I'm going to come back and I'm going to save this timeline with you as well. Yeah. But they don't explain like which is which. Mm-mm. So I'm like left a little confused about that.
I know. Well, and then on top of it, so the whole time that's happening, I was like getting excited because I'm thinking, oh, this is going to have a really fucked up ending, because he talks about the fact she tells him, you left, you got divorced, you left me. And she's got all this resentment, which is understandable, especially considering the father he was beforehand. And I'm like, oh, fuck, this dude's going to watch his daughter die in the future, come back and lose himself and his relationship with his daughter, trying to figure out how to save her in the future. What a cool fucking way to end this movie.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And then it comes back and it goes into the third act. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. That one really got away from us character development wise, didn't it?
Like, no, don't do that.
I actually thought that was the catalyst for him being so removed. Yeah. So I thought like, it doesn't matter that he knows what his future is. Like, emotionally he can't handle what he just went through, and it was going to happen anyway. And I was like, wow, that would have been a really interesting like thought process, right? Didn't happen that way. Like, it would have been a very depressing ending.
Sure.
But
I wanted that so much. Or the other thing that I thought, and a part of it was because he had just right before this, he had this conversation with his dad, J.K. Simmons, where he went to get help to run from the government. And his dad said, when I came back from Vietnam, it was safer for me to not be around you. And so I thought that he would have this realization that Chris Pratt's character would come back and go, she's this tough thing. She's the future. Like, she's the one that's going to figure out how to save the future. But she can't be that if I'm around. So he has to leave in order to fulfill the prophecy of her becoming the person that she is, this colonel that's this badass and figuring out how to save the future. And I'm like, what a disgusting choice to have to make for him to say, I can be the man I am and stay. But what risk do I run of ruining the future by not? And so he automatically pulls himself out. So I'm thinking one of these two
and that
endings
would mean that they would have had to fail in the toxin thing.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. Like they can't figure it out, or it breaks, or he loses it, or like something happens. And so he has to make, that would have been so frustrating.
And the boss, and then at this point, so when the attacks started happening and I was thinking that all the way through, she tells him this, and then they're working on the toxin, trying to rebuild that relationship. That's what I was thinking, is he was going to go back and go, she has to become this person, so I can't be around. And so he chooses to leave and everything be shitty. And then the base gets attacked. And that's when I thought, oh, he's going to go back, and having watched her die is going to make it so that he can't be around her emotionally. They didn't go either of those routes that they set up to go. They went I'm going to save the fucking world by being some weird ass hero. And I was like, oh, you just missed two really cool, really heartbreaking storylines. Because if she had lived and the base doesn't get attacked and he goes back and, the thing gets broken, now he's got to make her who she is, or it attacks and it's all fucked up when he goes back. I'm like, oh my God, this could have been so cool. And then I don't know what the hell they were thinking with that ending.
So Act 3, there's like so many questions, like so many just like points in that where I'm just like, why? Right?
Yeah.
Like, they go back and they're like, yo, I went back in time. I have a toxin from the future that can stop these things. And the government's like, nah, everything's fucked. We're done.
We're good.
I'm like, we were just time traveling 5 minutes ago, and this is the craziest thing you've heard today?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, not to mention you're willing to send your future, in essence, to die for the future, but you're not willing to work on something that's not going to kill anyone.
Yeah.
For
Send
Christ's sake,
20 people to Russia. That's it.
In fact, follow the same criteria. They're going to be dead in 2 weeks. You can figure that out. We've learned that, right? You know whether or not they live. Find somebody that's dead in a couple of weeks. Send their dumbasses to go find this spaceship. You're not out anything at that point. You're following your same rules. And if they do happen to find it, let's not rely on them to set some C4 in a spaceship and blow it up. Let's drop everything on this spaceship.
Absolutely.
I don't know. C4 has gotten... Maybe that got a lot better.
Yeah, that is
future.
Yeah, that is like Die Hard C4.
Right? That's Die Hard C4 on steroids. Dude. This guy's got one stick, and that's the biggest fuck. It left a crater.
Dude, they blow C4 craters, and then they blow more C4. And it freaking nukes the country. Like there's no more Siberia after what they did to that ship.
The ragtag group that he gets, I was dying laughing when we came up with Conspiracy Santa, because that was like
the best line in this movie.
Man, I was struggling too because he brings the toxin thing back to the Earth, right? And they like make this plan to go to Russia, and it cuts to his dad, and I just wanted to see it cut to him and hear him say, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two, and we covered it. State Farm, like this could have been the best State Farm commercial ever.
No shit.
That would have been beautiful. That's like the John Wick line where he's like, guns, lots of guns, which is like a Matrix line. That would have been a great crossover.
It would have been.
That's a crossover I didn't know that I needed, Ian.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Or the farmers.
Yeah.
We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. That's funny shit. Can we talk about J.K. Simmons for a minute? Because the man's 66 years old and he looks like
cut.
Dude was ripped. And I knew he got ripped for Justice League to play he was
Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, he played Commissioner.
He got ripped for that?
Because he was supposed to do like 3 movies. There was going to be the Batman movie with Ben Affleck after Justice League that got shut down. That then became what's-his-face's Batman movie. Anyway, he got ripped for that. And apparently he stayed ripped because fuck.
Yeah, dude, he is cut in this movie. What do we see him in? Just like a wife beater tank top, right?
Yeah, at the first.
Yeah, dude, he is.
Fuck. Yeah, dude's 66 years old. He beat some ass. That dude was ripped. It's crazy.
Yeah, he looked real good. I liked watching him on screen. I forget how much I like watching him until I see him. Like, I love
him. J.K. Simmons. He's one of my favorite.
I think that's what I mean when I'm like, Chris Pratt wasn't the best actor, because I think J.K. Simmons, might have been the best actor for me.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I will say this. So I love Chris Pratt, and I said in the spoiler free, this movie showed me that he could carry. Look, they hired up for Chris Pratt, and part of it's because he was a producer, executive producer of the movie, but he's so charismatic and funny and can play serious roles, and he's just so likable that you can't help but watch him and enjoy him in that part. He was a little weird at times, but I liked him in this movie, but he wasn't the best actor. J.K. Simmons completely outacted him. Yvonne Strahovski put in a hell of a performance, and I love her. I've known her since Chuck back in like 2002. I've watched her I'm glad she's catching up. And then she's been in this Netflix series too that I can't think of the name of, The Handmaid's Tale. She's been in that, which she's done an amazing job in that. I don't even like that show, but she kills it. So I was really happy to see her, and she acted the shit out of this movie, which was really cool. But I will say another thing that I struggled. It's probably the last thing I want to say, but we'll tell you. I'm sure you guys got some other things because I know there's some questions out there. But man, this movie, I did not enjoy. I'm a huge fan of comedic relief. Like, I think a lot of serious movies need that on occasion. This one, it felt so forced to me. Like, that character of Charlie was so over the top. Like, he had a couple of good moments that I really liked, but most of the time, every time he was on screen, I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, I didn't enjoy him, and I didn't enjoy. I wanted this movie to be rated R, and because it had violence. I even asked Casey, I was like, was this PG-13? Because there was some incredibly brutal violence in this movie, which surprised me. Take that, leave that, and then get rid of the comedy and make this movie just so fucking tense. Because they had movies, parts where it was so tense that I was like, oh shit, this is uncomfortable tense. These monsters are pretty scary. Leave that shit, make it R-rated, take it up a notch, leave out the comic relief, let Chris Pratt be your comic relief, and then move forward.
I thought that they were going to use that as like a pivoting point from like, oh, this is like, we don't know really what we're doing, what to expect, into a serious movie, right? Because you get to the point where they get back after the second act, right? And Charlie is there, but he's like not there, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, Charlie, you're back or whatever. I thought they were going to break Charlie, right? Into like, he's not funny anymore. Like, he's broken. But they didn't, right? Because in the next scene, he's just like this jolly old dude in a lab. And so I agree. I'm like, I thought it was going to pay off in that way, and it didn't.
No.
Well, especially where they set it up to, only 30% come back, and anybody that comes back is like broken, doesn't talk about it. Nobody really knows what goes on there, kind of a thing. So they like leaned into that part. But then when all these guys come back, they're all like the same self that they were. So I thought that was kind of, and speaking of R-rated, they used the F word once. And out of all the places they could have used it, they use it in the lab with Dorian saying like he didn't want to do something scientific or something like that, right? I feel like you could have found a better place, like maybe towards the end when you finally kill this female, or like Charlie when he cuts it down with the saw, like an FU there or something. But I thought it was funny, their choice of F word for the PG-13.
Yeah.
PG-13's never put him in the right place.
No.
Like, that's always
very rarely.
Place.
There's one that's hanging right on the tip of my brain that I was thinking of, that I was like, well, that was a perfect use of the F word in your PG-13, but I don't remember what it was. It'll come to me in like a week, and then we'll talk about it.
Was it the creepy, the road rage one where she's like, here's your fucking courtesy tap? Is that the one you're thinking of?
No, that one wasn't bad either. No, there was one that they dropped it, and I'm like, oh, that was perfect. But this one could have been better. Like especially with Chris Pratt in it, like you could have had it be like the comic relief part, like a quick comic relief where, like you said, Javier, he's making jokes and everybody's rolling. Then they actually drop him in, and like something happens, and he could have been like, fuck me. Like, and it would have forced you to laugh uncomfortably, because now, and that would have been a great transition from, because I see what you're saying. And I actually like that idea of have him be funny as hell, or over the top funny until they get there. And then you're like, oh, this is no joke anymore.
Yeah,
then there's nothing to laugh about. Yeah. There's nothing to make jokes about. And then that transition be the, oh, fuck me, or something like that. And then I think that would have been great. But I do think that they forced the comedy way too much.
Yeah.
After, because when it was serious, it was super serious.
Yeah, it's like pick a lane. Pick one.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? To Ian's point, like no one talks about it, right? When they get back, except for these characters. I've never been to war, so I don't know if I could really speak to this accurately, but I feel like I would tell everyone. I'd be like, there's like these freaking big old white tentacle dog things. They're terrifying, and you don't want to go over there. It sucks. I'm with you. People not talk about it.
I feel like human on human war is a little different. Like, I don't want to talk about that, but I think human on alien war, I'm coming back going, you don't want to fucking go. Fucking run. Nah, just get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, let's just wait 30 years. Let's just pretend this isn't happening.
Knock that shit off. And when you get there, because if you do go, just remember, they're big giant, like you said, they're big giant dogs with tentacles that shoot fucking spikes. They don't call them Whitespikes because they're spiky. They call them Whitespikes because that shit will kill you.
But they are also spiky. So.
Yeah. Oh, and all those bullets you have in this never-ending clip, they're not going to do shit because they have a hide that's bulletproof.
We didn't talk about this, right? And armor-piercing rounds exist.
Right.
So, did we try them and those also didn't work? So we're like, let's just set up with regular.
Murray popped up on that 50 cal and just blows them all away.
Yeah.
So why didn't they have more of those?
No shit.
You put an A10 in there, little bird. There, you're good.
I'm like, they're not cheap, but also like we really unloaded, so this war is expensive as is. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think my last thing I want to say about this is they're figuring out where these aliens are come from or where they came from. And they're just like, they're aliens, right? And they're like, oh, that's because they've been here the whole time. And I thought they were going to pull like a freaking like center Earth type thing. Like, oh my gosh, aliens have been in the ice cap this whole time and we had no idea. I was actually a little bit disappointed with the spaceship idea. And then they're like, oh, they're transporting its cargo. Like I felt like that storyline was like kind of forced, like getting away. If they had just told me these things were frozen in ice from the dawn of time, I would have thought like, that's crazy, right? Like I would have thought that was really cool. So I think this is the first time I was disappointed to see an alien ship.
Well, and they made the aliens flying this thing look really weird. Like they looked almost like reptilian or something. And then, yeah, like you said, they're just like these giant, it's like, oh, here we're landing on it. So did they follow these aliens' orders? Or like, could they communicate with these beasts? Because like, I'm sitting here going, because they said something about it's like a planet clearing cargo, like weapon, right? And I'm like, okay, that's a cool idea. Yeah. But how do they rein those fucking things back in?
Yeah, and then what?
Yeah,
you just wait until they all die? Like start it? Like what's the next couple of steps here? Because this is really difficult to deal with, it seems like.
Yeah.
I feel like they eat themselves to extinction. Because
could be
3 years, right? I think they said 3 years, all those things popped up.
Yeah, 3 years.
How they go from a spaceship full to 3 years, that many grown adults, but
it's true. 3 years plus, and there's only 500,000 people left on the Earth. She said at some point.
Yeah.
Going back to the swimming thing, do they swim from Russia to the United States?
I guess so.
Apparently. Yeah, they didn't really explain how those things spread very well.
Absolute stamina and cardio of these things.
I will say that's one thing I like kind of comparing this, because they kind of reminded me of Quiet Place aliens a little bit. Just like with being kind of super armored and can't kind of put them down very easy. But something I liked about Quiet Place that I think this could have done a little bit more with is like just leaving things out. Like we don't know how they got here. We don't know. Like almost like Javier said, like if they're just encased in ice and they've been here forever, like that would kind of, I feel like, almost yield to the story a little better than trying to make these like, oh, there's a spaceship, were they here to kill the planet, or were they just transporting? So
I had one more point that I want to bring up that I was just sitting here thinking about as we were talking. It bothered me because we were talking about the fact that they go over to Russia and they're fighting these things, and the big ugly female that he's run into in the future gets free. And J.K. Simmons, like, first of all, like 3 times they ignore each other to save each other between these two guys, right? So Chris Pratt and J.K. Simmons, this father and son duo. And these things, the small males we see earlier, like a couple of them knock a full out, going full speed Humvee.
Yeah.
For a loop, knocks it over. But Chris Pratt can jump and tackle this big ass queen. Like it stops moving forward. I was like, hold on. When did he become Dom? Like,
he comes out of nowhere too. He's just like,
and he grabs it and it just rolls onto the ground. I'm like, no, hold on. This thing's twice the size of the ones that knocked a Humvee like it was a toy car, and he just tackles it.
I had an issue with that scene too, because you don't find out that they can smell blood until Chris Pratt is in the future, and then his dad like cuts his hand. I'm like, his dad shouldn't know this. Right? Because this isn't common knowledge, because no one knew until we were in the future. Yeah,
they kept everything secret.
Right. So I'm like, okay, well, there goes that story.
I thought the same thing.
That was so dumb. Like, dude, that queen tore off her arm though. I was like, that was awesome.
Well, and then it was trying to like eat its, like scratch its own face off at the end when he slams it in its teeth.
I was like, no wonder why this is the dominant species. These things go hard.
Yeah,
man, I wouldn't cut my own arm off.
That's why this whole thing bothered me. I'm like, how did they get downtime to have conversations with these fucking things? These things are nuts.
Yeah, these things do not quit, man.
Yeah, this movie should have been much more frightening than it was and more intense. But anyway, we got us ready to rate this thing.
Yeah,
let's do it.
All right, I'm going to kick it off. It's been a while since I've started with this. I'm kind of like you, Javier. I probably enjoyed this movie more than I should have. And I think part of that was because of F9. I think the other part is the second act of this movie is quite enjoyable. It's intense. It's got some serious, consequences that you feel like could happen. So until you learn that those consequences aren't going to happen, it's pretty intense. It's pretty serious. The action's really fun. Surprisingly, most of the CGI is good. Especially the up close, the monsters. The
Except
part I did
Chris Pratt jumping on the monster.
Yeah, no shit. That was terrible. Well, there was some like with the big scale stuff too, like where they were blowing up cities and lands and shit that was really bad because the seaming was really bad. You could tell where they were cutting scenes of CGI together. So it looked horrible. But the actual up close, like the monsters looked great. They were scary looking. I enjoyed, like I said, the second act. The first act, I was kind of like, what are we doing here? The second act, I was like, oh, God, this is crazy. Up until the point that Chris Pratt goes back to our current time. And then the movie lost me. There was no consequences. We went into pure, unadulterated, no consequence superhero movie where he's going to save the world no matter what we do. And I just didn't like that. I felt like this movie could have been fantastic if they left with the dark notes, take out a lot of the comedy, have a repercussive ending like what we talked about with either Chris, the future being set in stone, so he has to go back to make sure his daughter becomes who she needs to be, or watching his daughter die doesn't allow him to overcome what he feels like he should be able to and stay with his family. So I feel like this could have been a fantastic movie. Instead, it's kind of almost average. I'm going to give it a 2 because when I did have fun, I had a fuck ton of fun. When I didn't, I really didn't. So I can't make it an average movie. I'm going to give it a 2. I don't think I would actively seek out this movie, but I think there are parts of it that if it was on, I wouldn't turn it off. But I wouldn't actively go watch this movie. There are most of the movies that it reminded me of, I'd go watch before I would watch this movie. So yeah, 2 for me. Javier, what about you, buddy?
Yeah, I agree. I think the third act kind of seems like a fan fiction alternative ending. It seems like the ending that you put in because the original ending was too depressing, right? Like it just didn't seal the deal super well. I'm going to give this a 2.5 though, because I had fun. The action was fun. Like if you can suspend your belief a little bit and just not think too much about time travel or guns or ammo or really anything concrete in reality, this movie's a lot of fun. So 2.5, I'd watch it again. I mean, not anytime soon, but yeah, I'd watch it again. I have no qualms with that.
Fair enough. Ian.
I don't think I have too much more to add. I found like this movie is one of those that's fun to talk about because I think all of us, after watching it before the podcast, said like there's a lot to talk about with this movie, whether that's really engaging action scenes, whether that's stuff that didn't make a lick of sense, or whether that was like really almost, I was kind of surprised how emotional the bit between him and his daughter was, like where that felt like an ending to me, and it was kind of hard to go back into that third act, but I was surprised how emotional that was for him to see his daughter die and then go back into and see her as this little girl. So it had like some really great parts, but put together it's something. It's something. But I'm gonna go with a 2. I had more fun than I thought I would, but it's still just so many glaring like stuff that I don't know. Like I said, you guys get what I'm saying.
Yeah, very disjointed movie.
I really get what you're saying.
Yeah. I even get that. I even get that lack of ability to express what you're trying to say. Like, I completely understand that.
They'll come up with a word for it in 30 years.
Yeah, but they won't send it back and tell us anything about it. So,
right.
Yeah, a very disjointed movie, but had some very enjoyable parts. I like that. Yeah, there it is. 2, and a 2.5. So right around an average movie, maybe a little bit below. But it was fun to watch anyway. And it was fun to talk about for sure, because there's lots to talk about. So with that, check us out on social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at What's Our Verdict. We always list out a good quick review that Ian writes. They're really awesome synopsis of the film and what we thought about it to break down what we talk about. But we appreciate you joining in for that. Go to our website, whatsourverdict.com, pick up some merch. Check out our episodes there. Interact with us. Leave us a comment on what you thought of the movie. We always like hearing about what everybody likes to think about the movies and then have those conversations break out. So we appreciate you tuning in. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Next week, Black Widow. Javier has fundamental issues with Marvel, so we'll get to hear about those, but we'll try to talk him out of it.
Why don't we just review this movie now? Scarlett Johansson, she did fine. The villain was, the CGI was okay. I really liked how she lost the original conflict and then became better and then came back and won the second conflict. Boom, we're done. We don't even have to do this next week.
Well, Javier, you can skip it if you want because we are going to have a special guest show up with us. So be prepared for that too.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure how I feel about offending someone I don't know, but I mean, if they're okay with it,
we'll see how it goes. Tune in next week for Black Widow review, and we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye now.
Cinemagic out.